Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the City of Holland and the Human and International Relations Commission, I welcome you to this evening. Today we have with us our new mayor, Mayor Box. He's probably right over there, still talking. But in any event, what I wanted to do today is just give you an introduction to our special guest today. Consul Gonzalez-Saiffe has been in his diplomatic post since September of 2017. Previously, he has served as a Mexican Foreign Ministry in executive positions in Canada from 2013 to 2017, Vietnam from 2011 to 2013, the United Nations from 2009 to 2011, and 2002 to 2003. And he has also served as a liaison for congressional affairs to United States House of Representatives from 2004 to 2008. He holds a bachelor's degree from Instituto Tecnológico Autónomo de México and a master's degree from Tufts University, Fletcher School of Law, and diplomacy at Tufts University. He has published numerous articles on Mexican foreign policy, and let's extend the warmest welcome to him. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther. It's a privilege to be here, and thank you for our new mayor, Mayor Nathan Box, that he told me it's only his third day. My God, I feel so honored that you're here, and recognizing and acknowledging the excellent relation that we have in the Consulate of Mexico with the city of Holland. So I had a chance to intertwine a little bit before I came here with high school students. That's right, on some of the questions they had regarding Mexico and Mexico-U.S. relations. And Esther told me that a lot of the community here is interested in the economic aspect of basically the trade relation between Mexico and the U.S., so I will address that as well. And just opening with a brief parenthesis for the people that are not sure of what's going on currently in Mexico. And Esther told me that we have a lot of important business community here, a lot of executives that have business in Mexico. So I would like to address that as well and giving you some facts of why, of course, I consider that Mexico is a huge opportunity for investments and for solidifying and strengthening our region, the region of North America, along with Canada, the US, and Mexico. So the first facts, Mexico is a democracy. In the last two presidential elections, power in Mexico has shifted from different political parties. Can somebody tell me what's the name of the president of Mexico? Extra point for whom? What's your name? She knows. Andrés Manuel López Obrador. That's the name of the new president of Mexico. And that's right. Almost a year ago, last December, Mexico organized the biggest election on our history. It covered more than 3,000 election posts, and we voted not just for governor, but for president, but for 9 governorships, the 2 houses of Congress, local congresses, and more than 1,500 mayors. It was a one-day journey, very important in the history of Mexico, in which 50 million votes were counted. And in Mexico, we have an independent electoral institutions that operated 150,000 ballot sites with 1.3 million officials. So here, some of you people might know, what's the population in Mexico? Oh, our students left. They knew that. 130 million. Exactly. 130. She needs, you have to talk with her teacher and give her an extra point. 130 million people live in Mexico. So to put things into perspective of what happened, if you think that President Trump winning the election here in the U.S. was a political tsunami. Well, Mexico was a political tsunami to the square. This is what happened in Mexico. And the past presidents in Mexico, President Peña Nieto, President Calderón, and President Fox, won approximately 30 to 35% of the vote. In Mexico, you don't need the 50%. The one that has the more votes, that's the one that wins. Well, President López Obrador won with 53% of the votes. He was the first place in all the states that voted except one in the north. And he won the upper house and the lower house as well. So this was a complete shift in the elections in Mexico. So a lot has been written about his economic agenda. What's the economic agenda of López Obrador? Well, to the surprise of many, the budget he presented a year ago was deemed as responsible economic policy. And the first very important decision was electing a finance minister, very conservative, that presented a fiscally conservative budget. So far, I think that the market has given its verdict. In the last year, the peso has been very, very stable, and in fact, it has appreciated a little bit. Consumer confidence in Mexico, the last data that I read today in the morning, has increased 42% in this first year, the biggest since 2001. So what's the forecast right now? It's a modest GDP growth, inflation to 3%, and a primary fiscal surplus. Now, López Obrador has stated publicly, and this is going to be a huge challenge, that he wants Mexico to grow at 4 to 5% growth at the end of his administration. How many years are you president in Mexico? Oh, you don't know this one. Who can take a guess? 1 year? No, more than that. Gentleman says 5. Somebody gives more? 6 years. Mexico, the president is in power for 6 years, but we have no re-election in Mexico. One time, that's it. Because we had a guy in the 1900s that was in power for 30 years, Porfirio Díaz, and we said no more. So after that, only one time, and there's no re-election in Mexico. So López Obrador has said that at the end of the 5th year, he hopes that we can grow at 4%. And what's the emphasis in the new government? Well, more public investment, particularly in infrastructure. And this is a personal opinion. This is not an official opinion. I think that NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, was very good for what NAFTA was created, basically to increase the flow of goods and services between Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. But NAFTA was not created to fight inequalities, and that's what I think has happened in Mexico. I'll give you some numbers later on the presentation, but in terms of GDP, Mexico is approximately the 13 to 12, depending on the publication that you read. We're basically like the 13th economy in the world in terms of GDP, of what we produce. I forgot your name. Andrea. As Andrea said, we're 130 million people in Mexico. Out of this, 80%, I would say, we're middle class. The middle class has been growing in Mexico, but we still have around 50% of Mexicans in the poverty line. We have a very rich north. We have a very rich, I think, Mexico City. For the people that have visited Mexico City, it's a megalopolis of 20 million people. It's like a New York, exciting city. But if we go to the southeast of Mexico, there's poverty. If we go to the Guerrero state, there's poverty. So López Obrador said, yes, I want Mexico to grow, but I want to fight inequalities. And I want to invest in the areas where we need to grow, and paradoxically, where we have a flow of migrants coming to the U.S. The best way, according to the new government, to manage immigration, well, is to foster prosperity in the areas where migrants are immigrating. Not walls, not rules like that, investing in people. And that's what López Obrador has been saying. So the major programs that the new government is planting, it's what he calls a trans route from the Gulf to the Pacific, basically like a Panama Canal, but within Mexico. Also what we call the Maya touristic train for the people that have visited. Some of you have visited Cancun, right? Yes. The mayor has visited Cancun. He has fond memories of Cancun, I can tell. Well, when you go down of Cancun, we have what we call the Mayan route, or the Mayan Peninsula. It's fantastic. You can follow all the Mayan civilization along the Mayan Peninsula. It's fascinating, but basically nowadays you have to rent a car. The project now, it's building a train, huge train that would connect this area. And also what's very interesting, now when Mexico presented its budget, the new government, it's linking the prosperity of Mexico to the prosperity of the countries of Central America. In saying we have to acknowledge also the fact of what's happening in Central America, so we have to invest in Central America. The first letter that President López Obrador wrote to President Trump was, it's another name, but basically proposing let's do like a Marshall Plan of prosperity for the southeast part of Mexico and from Central America. And he said that's the best way that we can manage immigration. So his vision basically, keep growing, attacking internal inequalities, and strengthening social and economic development programs. If you're interested in this program, I can tell you about it, but it will take now a huge chunk of the time. So that's the first reason. Second reason, as I've told you, Mexico is one of the largest economies of the world. 1.1 trillion economy, according to the projection, and the last Goldman Sachs prediction, they're saying that by the year 2040, Mexico should be one of the top 10 economies in the world. Third reason to invest in Mexico, we have great macroeconomic stability. As I already highlighted, the peso has been quite stable. Fourth, we've been having a lot of debate in terms of if the US Congress is going to approve or not what they call USMCA. It's difficult for me, it's like a song, YMCA. I like NAFTA much more. But let's not forget that Mexico is one of the most open economies on the world. We have a free trade agreement, very modern free trade agreement that we just renegotiated with Europe. Canada did the same. The US has not done that. We have free trade agreements in Asia. Remember that on the Obama administration, Mexico, Canada, and the US were negotiating the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Agreement. That was the first decision of President Trump, was to retire from TPP. Mexico and Canada did not retire. That agreement has been signed, so it's a free trade agreement with Australia, Singapore, Thailand, Korea. It's very strong. We also have a free trade agreement with Japan. To the south, we have a free trade agreement with what we call the Pacific Alliance, with open economies in South America, which includes Chile, includes Peru, includes Panama, and now we have a lot of countries that are participating as well. Now we have 15 to 20 what we call associated countries. So to make the story short, Mexico has free trade agreements with 52 countries in the world by means of 15 free trade agreements. Last week, more than that, a little bit more than that, the Chinese Michigan Chamber of Commerce invited me to give a talk on why to invest in Mexico. So I had pretty much the same numbers. Well, I was surprised that they knew everything already. And they're building industrial parks in Mexico. They have Chinese attorneys, they have Chinese moving companies, they have everything. And I asked them, why are you doing that? And they answered to me, well, we don't believe only now that when you see a garment, it should say made in China. We believe not that it should be made by Chinese, wherever you can make it. And they think that Mexico is a very fascinating country because of all the free trade agreements that we have. For the Chinese have, with a lot of vision, saying if we are in Mexico, we can export our products basically to any market in the world. An hour ago, I was telling you also about the demographic phenomenon in Mexico. We are a young country. The median in Mexico, it's in the 20s, 22 to 26 years old. We have a very young, talented, highly skilled people. More than 150,000 Mexican engineers graduate each year. Let's put this into perspective. That's more engineers than the ones that graduated from Germany, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Brazil. As I told you, the case of the demography here in the US, your population is not that young. Your median is not in the 20s. So unless you have more immigration influx, it's going to be very tough for the people that are retiring to receive, to have a good retirement if not a lot of people are contributing to the Social Security Fund. And I won't get into the immigration debate if you don't want me to, but that's a different scenario in the case of the complementarity between Mexico and Canada. Sixth, we are a leader in advanced manufacturing. And you know this here in Michigan. Mexico is the sixth supplier to the American aerospace industry. In medical devices, we are number one and the main supplier to the US. And speaking of autos and auto parts, we're the 8th world producer, 4th exporter globally of new light vehicles, and 11 of light vehicles sold in the US were produced in Mexico. Parentheses, when you hear that somebody's tweeting that Mexico is taking away jobs from the US, that's not true. Why? Because every time that Mexico exports, 40% of the exports were made in the US. Basically, a car made in Mexico is a car made in North America, because the supply chains are so interconnected between Mexico, Canada, and the US that the cars that you're driving, one of that part came back and forth many times before the final assembly. So basically, when we say it was made in the US, made in Canada, made in Mexico, we can say it was made in North America. So based on this, you can see that Mexico is a very reliable, very attractive destination for the executives here for your investment. And I'll get to Michigan a little bit later. But now let me give you some pointers on what we have accomplished with NAFTA and then with USMCA. Mexico and the US, we have 50 border crossings, 50, where we have a free trade, a flow of goods and services. The NAFTA market, because we still have NAFTA, it's a market of 18 trillion USSD. That's bigger than the European Union by 2, and without counting Brexit. Let's see what happens with Brexit pretty soon. To put this thing into perspective, the bilateral trade between Mexico and the US is $1 million per minute. So in the time that I have been speaking, $9 to $10 million have been traded already. 1 million people cross the border legally every day. 3,000 vehicles cross the border every day. Last January, we got the last data in terms of trade. Now, Mexico, from January to October, let's see the latest data, we became the first trading partner of the US and the second largest export market for the US. So to put things again into perspective, that means that trade with Mexico supports thousands and thousands of jobs here in the US. And this is where we find USMCA. So, when President Trump started in office, his first decision, as I said before, was to say, I don't want to be in the TPP, the free trade agreement with Asia. And he put the qualification that the worst trade agreement ever signed was what? NAFTA. That's what he said. That's the worst trade agreement that has ever signed. But he couldn't retire from NAFTA. Why? Because the different states, including Michigan, told him, if you retire from NAFTA, we're going to lose thousands and thousands of jobs, and this is going to cripple the manufacturing sector in the US. So we started negotiations, and basically I can tell you that at the end of the USMCA negotiations, this is a NAFTA with a facelift. But our NAFTA agreement was salvaged, and this is very good for the industry because it provides certitude. When you visit the auto industry, it's very important for when they start planning their future investments to know what's going to be the legal scenario, not in 1 year and 2 years, but in 5 or 10 years. And if you don't know if you're going to have a free trade agreement in 5 or 10 years, you're not going to invest. So the end of the negotiations was very, very, very important to provide certitude. And the good thing also about USMCA is that we salvaged NAFTA, but we have new chapters on areas that were not present in 1994. Digital trade, to name some, anti-corruption measures. We strengthened disciplines in labor, very important on the environment, which were of very limited scope on NAFTA. One of the first proposals in the U.S. trade negotiation team was to put tariffs on Mexico agriculture sector. We finalized that and we took that away. So the good news is that you're going to be able to keep eating your avocados here in Holland. No tariffs for the agriculture sector. And of course, we can keep advancing and strengthening North America as the most prosperous region of the world. So what's next? The treaty has to be ratified. It has already been ratified by the Mexican government. The López Obrador administration is delivering very, very fast. Here in the US, sometimes they say, oh, the socialist government in Mexico. Well, it's different, the term socialist in Mexico, of what I hear here in the US. Mexico is totally a pro-trade country, as I mentioned before. And USMCA was approved really, really fast in the Mexican Senate. I think that once the Canadians see a sign that the same thing is going to happen in the US, Parliament in Canada will approve it pretty fast. And even we have Prime Minister Trudeau still in power. President Trudeau won the re-election just 3 weeks ago. But regardless if the Conservatives would have won in Canada against the Liberals, I'm sure the Conservatives would have voted also in favor, because in Canada also the DNA is pro-trade in both parties, both in the Liberal Party and in the Conservative Party. So basically the ball right now is in the US Congress. Today, I read I was hearing the radio in NPR. Apparently there is a statement from Majority Leader President Nancy Pelosi saying that there's an initial agreement, which is a surprise if you're here, been reading what's been happening in Washington with all the acrimony between the Republican and Democratic Party. Well, there's negotiations going in terms of USMCA. So let's hope. I truly believe that if they put the agreement on the floor, it has enough votes to be approved. But this has to happen before Thanksgiving. This all of you know when it's Thanksgiving. You didn't know the population in Mexico, but you know Thanksgiving. So we have basically 2 weeks. Let's see what happens in 2 weeks. Why am I confident that the USMCA will be approved? Because as I said, it's reached $1 trillion a year, which is 2.7 billion daily. And when you have that, you have proved that this is a very important agreement. Since NAFTA came into force, the North American trade right now, it's $1.3 trillion. And the last numbers that I read from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is that jobs that NAFTA provides in the U.S. are 5 million American workers depend on U.S.-Mexico trade. 5 million people. In terms of Mexico-Michigan, the trade with Mexico provides approximately 440,000 jobs in the state of Michigan. And let me give you the numbers between Mexico and Michigan. Right now, the economic relation between Mexico and Michigan is around $70 billion a year. To put this number into perspective, Mexico's second trading partner is Canada. Our trade relation with Canada, which is hugely important for both countries, is in the number of 30 to 35 billion a year. So if Michigan were to be a country, Mayor, if you want to take this idea. If Michigan were to be a country, you would be our second trading partner. But, of course, if Texas and California were also countries, you would be the third. But imagine that. Also, Texas and California are in the border with Mexico. Michigan is not. And you're the third trading partner of Mexico. And, of course, the big driving force is the auto sector. The auto sector is a hugely interconnected area, and the number two, very important for this area of Michigan, is agriculture. There's many different aspects of USMCA that I have with you, but I don't want to bore you with specifics. So I want to take a session, if you agree, Esther, of questions and answers. But my message is here that the last administration, this administration, and the lady asked me before how many consulates Mexico has in the U.S. We have 50 consulates. Consulates are basically small embassies in which we represent, in the area of our circumscription, the interest of Mexico. We represent Mexico in terms of trade, any political relation. We're in very close contact with the Mexican population, with the Mexican American population. Mexico recognizes the dual nationality. That means that if somebody from Mexico came to the U.S., they became an American citizen, they won't lose their Mexican nationality. But it also means that if a Mexican national has children in the U.S. that were born in the U.S. and they want their kids also to have the Mexican nationality, Mexico will grant the nationality, and they can have this dual nationality. And basically, we believe in strengthening our relationship. We don't think that the formula for success, that the formula to keep growing should be an antagonism. We want to keep building bridges of understanding. And I talk a lot about numbers, and I talked a lot about trade. But our most important commonality is our people. And we believe that it's very important, and I was happy to talk with students, if we can foster more interchange of students, if we can understand more the culture of the U.S. and Mexico, of Mexico and the U.S. We believe that it's very important nowadays to fight this dogma of assimilation, because assimilation to what? I was speaking with the mayor and a very nice cocktail that he organized. Thank you. Thank you very much, about the importance of diversity, about the importance of inclusion, and about the importance of recognizing that nowadays we can have a lot of loyalties. We can have a loyalty to the country where our parents were born, and a loyalty to the country where we live in. And that's perfectly fine. And the social fabrics of a country are going to be strengthened when we recognize our differences and recognize at the same time that migrants have contributed a lot to the social inclusion, to the economic development, and to the ties. So I was very happy, parentheses, there was a Cinco de Mayo parade in Detroit. And as you know, Cinco de Mayo is not the Mexican Independence Day. Somebody knows when the Mexican Independence Day is? Well, 16th of September, very good. You're all invited next 16th of September to the celebrations that we organize in Detroit. But regardless of that, Cinco de Mayo has, in the U.S., it's a day where we basically acknowledge the contributions of the Mexican American and nowadays the Hispanic population. But I was happy to see a lot of people in the streets with a Mexican flag, but also with the American flag, marching and recognizing this concept that people saying, okay, we appreciate the culture. Somebody said the food of Mexico. Nowadays that we just passed Halloween, but a lot of people are celebrating the Day of the Dead as well, which is beautiful, beautiful celebration. So this links of understanding between our cultures is important, and with other cultures as well. So I'll finalize saying that our relationship must not be defined by the challenges we face, but by the prosperity and opportunities we can create together. So I will leave it like this. Thank you very much.
Any questions for the Consul General? Is there someone who would like to ask a question?
It was a very clear presentation.
Yes, very clear. Oh, we have someone here? Oh, no.
Thank you for your presentation, and a lot of great information, and I really enjoyed your message. Could you please perhaps comment a little bit about the country of Mexico's position on climate change and the environment?
Thank you so much. That's a great question. Well, Mexico, that's a question on the multilateral level, and Mexico has acknowledged both at the federal government, at state governors, and the municipal level that we have a challenge, and that the climate change, it's a reality that we have to face, and we have to face in the global perspective. And that's why Mexico, since its initiations, we acknowledge, we ratified the Beijing Protocol, and we participated fully in the Paris Climate Agreement. Not only that, Mexico ratified an internal law in which we are advancing in an alternative, I'm translating in my, in clean energy by the year 2030. And Mexico was one of the, I think we were the 5th or 6th country to ratify the Paris Agreement. And in that regard, we want to keep working with the U.S. It was, regretfully, that's our position. We regretted the fact that the Trump administration has announced that the U.S. will retire from the Paris Agreement on climate change. We fully believe that that the debate between growth and fighting the phenomenon of climate change, it's a false debate, because we can create a lot of opportunities, investment in clean technology. And there's many areas in the U.S. I visited. California, it's Palm Desert, and I was surprised to see the windmills, and with very adverse climate situation and how clean energy is being produced. So we hope that this debate it's taking part with facts, with number, and in Mexico it's in this ball game, and I think that in Latin America one of the leaders.
With all those engineers graduating, I just wondered what they're selecting for their majors. Is it mainly civil engineering, electronic engineering, chemical engineering? What is the need now of Mexico?
That's a tough one. I don't know if that's the answer. That's the answer, because I when I go to the companies, I don't ask them exactly what their specialty is. But what I can tell you is that in Michigan, they need a lot of engineers. And they've been finding that in Mexico, as we created NAFTA, now NAFTA with 25, 26 years in force, the trickle effect that it has created is that it has, our economies are interchanged, and especially in the auto sector. So the need for more engineers has produced in Mexico the fact that a lot of people know that there's a lot of opportunities in this area. And we're seeing the number that I showed, 150,000 engineers graduating. The concrete specialty, to be honest, I wouldn't know. But we do have a NAFTA visa. And the NAFTA visa basically entitles companies to put the numbers and saying, we have this job, they offer this job in the US market. If the job is not taken, you can apply for the NAFTA visa and bring the specialties of people in the labor force that you don't have. And it's been highly beneficial for many companies. We hope that it's not an area that it's curtailed as we get mingled in the local immigration debate. But so far, I can tell you, and my colleague Jesus is here with me, I think that you also have a lot of numbers. You've met with a lot of the engineers. We have a very robust area of engineers, and a lot of course, American companies in Mexico hiring Mexico engineers. And I'll make a brief commercial. Our airline, Aeromexico, has a lot of direct flights to different cities from Detroit. And not just Cancun or Puerto Vallarta. Now a lot of to Querétaro, a huge area where the Volkswagen is made, to Monterrey, León, Guadalajara, different cities in Mexico, and many of the cities are not touristic cities. It's because of the business links that we have. So traveling Aeromexico, it's a very good airline.
Any other questions?
I'm aware of the industrial parks and regions that are being developed in Mexico, and I hear very good reports on them. What is Mexico doing to enhance the skill training of non-university graduates, those people from the technical institutes that are needed in those regional zones?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's one of the priorities of this new government, acknowledging all the labor force of people that have not graduated from universities but are there willing to work and creating, ¿cómo se llaman? The technical, no. Well, you also call them here in the U.S. I forgot the exact name. Vocational, yeah. A lot of vocational and that's an effort that's also created at the state level. One of the challenges for Mexico is increasing our tax revenue. It's not that high in Mexico. So this government acknowledges the fact that there's also a lot of informality in the workforce, and the basic idea is bringing more people to the formal sectors by more polytechnicos acknowledging that fact. And as I said before, even though Mexico has been growing, even though our middle class has been growing, we have to bring more people out of the poverty line. But we can go into that in more detail tomorrow. No, don't worry, this is only
No
one.
no más hora.
You won't be here until tomorrow.
Gracias. I'm curious, I know you said that the president is now addressing poverty and wants to do something about that. A lot of the people that I see come from Mexico or Central America, and the only way they can get in is by a coyote, because I think a lot of people don't know that you can put your petition in to come into the United States legally, and you have to wait maybe 15, 20 years to get in. But my concern is, what is Mexico doing to help the poor so they don't have to find the need to sneak and risk their lives to come into this country? Then when they get here, they suffer even more. I'm a clinical social worker. I see a lot of people with mental and also emotional problems. And in this community, in this county, we aren't addressing those needs. And there are two of us who provide counseling for almost, about 17% of 17 to 20% of the population of Ottawa County. That's not enough. So we need to do more, but what is Mexico doing?
Well, thank you very much for your question, and thank you very much for your work and for your passion. And basically what Mexico can do and what Mexico should be trying to do is to grow and to provide more jobs in Mexico. And that's why USMCA, it's very important for Mexico, it's very important for the US, and it's very important for Canada. Internally, Mexico, now what it has to do, it's foster more competition internally. The phenomena that we saw in the car industry, that's something that I wish we could see in other industries as well. So now we're promoting at the consular level also the different states. So in a sense, I think it's a good competition. When the state of California tells us what our tax incentives are to invest there, and Querétaro is doing the same thing, and they are competing to get into the market. So now it's very important for the states of the poorer regions in Mexico to start doing the same. As I said, the government of López Obrador in its DNA, it's doing that, and it will be very important, and it's one of the debates, to have a very good relationship with the private sector in Mexico. And depending on the newspaper you read now in Mexico, and let's acknowledge that, you're going to see that López Obrador is the best president or the worst president ever. Because I say that's the paradox of the blanket. And I'll explain the paradox of the blanket. The last governments had a blanket here, and they were covering this area. But when a new government comes and they say, now we're going to cover this area, the people that were covered here are not happy. So there's a debate in Mexico, just as the one you see here in the U.S. So I hope that the U.S. is a partner of Mexico in this regard, and we can present more compelling arguments to fostering prosperity and to fostering development. We have to acknowledge the fact, I think, that you cannot talk about immigration separating the trade talk or the development talk. They're intertwined. I mentioned before here to the high school students that there's a very interesting cartoon in The Economist of a couple of weeks ago in which a migrant is at the border, the Mexico-US border, and there's two signs. And one sign says no trespassing, and the other sign says we're hiring. And the migrant, well, which one is it? And paradoxically, it's both. There's not enough temporary working visas to come work at the US, but at the same time, companies are hiring. And if Mexico cannot grow at a bigger rate than the 1 or 2% that we actually have, Mexico is not going to catch up to the US. So there is going to be a magnet for people that want to come to the US to have a better life. So either the US provides more temporary working visas, or you invest in Mexico or Central America. If you only put walls, that's not going to resolve anything. Because when there is a market and there is the will of the people, there is not going to be a law or a bridge or a wall that's going to deter anything. So I was putting the example that we have an agreement with the government of Canada, in which the Canadian government tells the Mexican government, we're going to need, 50,000 agriculture workers for Ontario. Mexico trains the workers. They tell 2 years in advance. They go, they work, they even have a medical insurance. They finish in the season, and then they go back. We have a circular movement of workers. They never stay. In Canada, the winters are too harsh. They come back. But paradoxically, that's the way immigration used to work. With the US, people came and they went back. Because there's another interesting phenomenon. When you ask somebody from Mexico where they are going to retire, they always tell you, we want to go back to Mexico. Mm-hmm. No, and how long have you been here? 30 years. They're not going to go back. But in their mind, it's that. But the circularity process was curtailed as the law started to get stricter, because then the people couldn't go back. No, so they stayed, and eventually they brought their families, and now this is where we are. I hope, but in international relations you cannot hope. I know that the immigration debate is going to get worse probably next year as the presidential election gets closer, because immigration is going to be used as a tool to get more votes. I don't think that's the way to resolve the immigration phenomena. I think that it would be very important for every state that they would say how much workers we're going to need, acknowledge the market paradigm, train as much workers so they can come and they can leave. But if you're not going to do that, what we're seeing at the consulate, it's tragic stories every day. Mm-hmm. Tragic stories about people that are working hard, that are contributing to the economy, and a lot of families that have been here 15, 20, 25 years, that they pass a red light. And Mayor, we needed to provide driving permits to the immigrants. It's very, very important. Not driver licenses, because I understand that licenses provide political rights. Mm-hmm. But for residents, acknowledging the fact that they are residents, that they have a job, that they can prove their residence, providing a permit that would change the lives of many people. It would provide security for the communities, because then they would have to take driving examinations, you would have less people fleeing the scene, because basically if they pass a red light or they get into an accident, they're risking their lives, they can get deported, and there's more taxes for the government. So everybody wins. This is a huge area, and I've talked to Mayor Rosamond Bliss about this many times. I've talked with Governor Whitmer. I've talked, and basically the government came forth and said, we believe in this. Now I have to convince the other side of the aisle. Yeah. But I believe that at the local level, the councils have a saying as well. So if you want to increase your popularity in one day, they're going to see people with your picture. They're very excited in doing this. And sorry that I made it a parenthesis. But I'll be happy to talk about just the immigration. It's a huge area, and I would just say that this is a phenomenon that cannot be resolved unilaterally. Mm-hmm. It needs the cooperation of both the countries where the migrants are coming, the countries that are receiving, and as one of the questions said before, and the other talk, Mexico nowadays is not just a country where people are going, we're receiving a lot of immigrants as well. Mm-hmm. A lot of immigrants from Central America, from Haiti, even from Africa. So we have to understand what causes people to leave their homes, what causes people to leave their families, and even though it sounds like cliche, acting as human beings.
Thank you very much for coming today. Can we give them a round? Thank you very much. So I just want to thank you again. I hope that you will come and visit us again soon. The International Relations Commission, their mission is the City of Holland connected to and growing with the wider world. And that's what we choose to do here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Mayor, we have a little gift for the mayor.
Oh.
Mexican candies made in Mexico.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's take it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yes. Oh yeah, you tell me where you want me to be. Yes.
Let me see. No. Mayor.
All right. All right.
And then you can come over here.
All right.
But I want Mexico to show the middle.
Nos damos la mano, Lupita.
There we go. I like it when I get good instruction.
Exactly. We like clarity.
Watch out for the candy.
Mexico, ready?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And I was not aware of the permit. I want to start pursuing that more.